And we continue at 105 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, The John Phillips Show, broadcasting live from the Morongo Casino Resort and Spa Living Room Studios. Mr. Randy Wang has the week off. He is enjoying himself on vacation, presumably spending lots of time in hot tubs. 800-222-KABC is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is a pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. She is a columnist for the Southern California News Group, which, of course, is the LA Daily News, the Orange County Register, the Riverside Press Enterprise, and most importantly, the Redlands Daily Facts. She's also host of the Howard Jarvis Radio Show, which airs Monday nights right here on AM 790 KABC. You can follow her on Twitter at Susan_Shelley. Susan Shelley, welcome.
Thank you, John. Great to be with you.
Likewise. So it's hot. My power went out last week for virtually an entire day. It's been triple-digit temperatures. We've certainly been seeing a lot of stories in the newspapers about the heat wave, which they, of course, attribute entirely to global warming. And the state of California is a state that believes in green energy. Now, fortunately, we haven't seen large-scale brownouts or blackouts in the state this summer. However, the state is not entirely relying on solar energy and green energy as they would make you think. They love to pat themselves on the back and congratulate one another for moving in the direction of green energy. But Susan, as you've been chronicling on your Twitter feed, when push comes to shove, that's not what's keeping the AC on.
It sure isn't. We're running on natural gas, especially at night. It's so funny. People think they're plugging their electric car in and it's running on solar panels. It's running on natural gas. And if they make you give up your gas stove and your gas water heater and your gas clothes dryer and use electric, when you plug them into the wall, they're running on natural gas. This is the biggest fraud, and it's so costly. And people just have to be educated to what's really going on.
It's almost as if they haven't thought this through, Susan.
Well, you won't be shocked to hear this, but several of the bills that have required us to go to more and more and more renewable energy were written by Kevin DeLeon, who was then a state senator, and he was responsible for this. One was signed in 2018, which said we had to go to 60% renewable energy by 2030, and I think by 2050, I don't know, but by 2045 we have to be 100% carbon free. And what this means is that the utilities have to buy through long-term contracts. This law required them to do 10-year contracts, even if they were locking in high prices that would drop later. They have to do long-term contracts with solar and wind providers. But when solar and wind are not working for us, like at night, what happens is they have to go out and procure energy somewhere else. So we use natural gas, nuclear, large hydro projects. These don't count as renewable, even though nuclear and large hydro are renewable. They don't count as renewable. And we're running on natural gas. And also, we're importing electricity from other states, which a lot of people would be surprised to hear.
Boy, Kevin DeLeon is just the gift that keeps on giving, isn't he? I find it fitting that the state of California has the dimmest bulb of them all writing all of our energy policies. And the reason that he did it, it's not that he knows anything about this. He knows nothing. He's one of these career politicians that just jumps from office to office. What his motivation was back when he was doing all of this, when he was delusional enough to think he would beat Dianne Feinstein, he would be the next U.S. Senator for the state of California. He needed a sugar daddy because he has no money. So he decided that Tom Steyer, who is an enviro sugar daddy, would be his personal sugar daddy. And if he wrote all of his stupidity into law, then that way he would get Tom Steyer to open up his checkbook and would finance his campaign for U.S. Senate. Well, he gave us all of this bad legislation. He got Tom Steyer's money, he wasted all of it, and he lost for U.S. Senate, and now he's an unelectable pariah on the L.A. City Council.
And we're stuck with his energy laws. It's really unfortunate because the large providers of energy, the gas-fired power plants, they can't get these long-term contracts because everybody knows they're going to be forced to stop selling electricity. And the same with nuclear. And yet, because we need it, we had this desperation move last year at the end of the budget process to keep the gas-fired plants open with your money and to keep the nuclear plant, Diablo Canyon, open with your money, because the owners of them aren't investing in them. Why would they? And no one's building new ones. Why would they? Because California has essentially made their product illegal, even at the same time they're using it. So I guess the war on drugs is sort of the model for our energy policy.
And this is yet another example as to why term limits are a bad idea. He would have stayed in the state legislature forever if he had the opportunity. It's a regular paycheck. He was the guy who was in charge. He got to drink the nice wine. He got to go on the junkets. He got to meet important people. But because of term limits, he had to find another place to go. And that place he chose, was the U.S. Senate. And that's why he had to curry favor with Tom Steyer. That's why he had to do all of these stupid things. That's why he had to wreck our energy policy. It was strictly so he could find another office to go to so he could continue his career.
You know, the really sad thing about this is people have been brainwashed into thinking that this is saving the planet. And it doesn't do anything for the planet. California, the whole state, is 1% of global greenhouse gas emissions, which means that even if we meet all our targets, even if we fell into the Pacific Ocean, it would make no difference to the global climate. And so China's burning coal, India's burning coal, Germany's burning coal. What we're doing in California doesn't do anything. So all we're doing is costing ourselves a ton of money and wrecking our economy because it raises the cost of living. It raises the cost of everything when you raise the cost of electricity and gas and other fossil fuels. It just winds up costing you more money for nothing.
Well, from their point of view, they have a bulletproof argument. Because if you gave them everything they wanted, if you got rid of all the nuclear plants, you got rid of natural gas, you got rid of coal, you got rid of everything that they regard as energy that is not clean, and we had to rely only on green energy to keep the state going, the lights would be off all the time. And they would not acknowledge that their policies failed the state. They would not acknowledge that green energy isn't enough to keep us moving. They would say, well, it's just these rising temperatures due to global warming. If it weren't for global warming, our green energy would keep us humming right along. But thanks to global warming, that's why the lights are off.
Well, that's just not true. I mean, all of these renewables, they only provide at the most 50% of the power that the state of California needs in the middle of the day when the sun is out and you've got all the solar panels pumping out electricity. At best, we get to between 40 and 50% in the summertime of what our demand is for electricity. So what do you think the state of California is planning? They are funding in this year's budget something called demand response, which means they're going to force you to use less electricity, either with rolling blackouts or with higher prices. And this is just imposing conservation through poverty, which is cruel and ridiculous and unnecessary. All they have to do is change these laws, and we'll be much, much better off.
And what I'm so surprised at is how many people who are so obsessed with aesthetics in this state. You could look at these lawns, and these lawns look like they're manicured. There's not a leaf that's out of place. Yet they have these solar panels on their roof, and it looks like Mikhail Gorbachev's head with the birthmark. I can't believe they put it on there.
Well, a lot of people think they're saving money on it, and they compare their current electric bill to their previous electric bill, and they don't count how much they paid for the solar panels. Okay, that's fine, but guess what? They're changing the pricing structure for the investor-owned utilities. Starting in 2025, they're going to make income-based fixed charges, which means that if you're connected to the grid, which you have to be, if you're connected to the grid, then you're going to pay a fixed charge for electricity, even though you have solar panels, which is based on your income and could be hundreds and hundreds of dollars more than you're paying now. So they're going to get you coming and going on this, and it's just a big scam.
Well, and I love the fact that all of these utilities, and I'm not just going to limit this to Southern California Edison, but PG&E is just as bad, LADWP, the rest of them. They jack up our rates and jack up our rates and jack up our rates. and they figure out ways to change the methodology of how they bill us, and we're always going to end up paying more. It's never going to work out to your advantage, and we end up forking more money over to these public utilities every single year. Yet, when we ask them to start fixing their equipment that keeps starting all the fires, they go, oh, sorry, we don't have the money.
That's true. And a lot of times the legislature doesn't even ask them to do that. What they ask them to do is go pay for charging infrastructure for the electric cars that no one owns. So that's one big thing that they're having to do. And now electric trucks that have been mandated down the road. So we're going to have the utility companies installing all of this extra infrastructure on their side, on the utility side, to accommodate the charging of all of these vehicles. And who pays for that? That's going to be charged to the ratepayers. So it's either the taxpayers or the ratepayers, and guess what? They're the same people, and you're just going to be paying for this nonsense coming and going. And there's no reason for it. It's not saving the planet. It's not cleaning the air. It's just a big scam.
Last week, I had the motorman Leon Kaplan in for an hour, and I asked him about electric cars, and he said the technology is just not there yet, particularly for the trucks. You cannot move items around the country from places like the Port of Los Angeles on electric trucks and expect it to be there in any reasonable amount of time. And I was trying to think to myself, when is it that I've even seen an electric truck on the road? And I drive close to that Alameda corridor all the time. I'm near the Port of Los Angeles all the time. The only time I ever see a truck that's identified as an electric truck is Coca-Cola. I don't know if you've seen any of these Coca-Cola trucks on the road, but I've seen a number of Coca-Cola trucks where it says all over the side of it that it's an electric vehicle. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, great. Now we're not going to be able to get Coca-Cola, too. That's just exactly what the world needs. A bunch of people with caffeine headaches who are extra hostile.
You know, I think the post office has been ordered to change over to electric trucks, so we won't get the mail either. This is going to work out fine.
Well, the post office is just switching to electric, so when the postmen open fire, there's not a gas tank there that can ignite.
At least it's practical. At least there's a practical reason for it.
We're speaking with Susan Shelley, who's a columnist for the Southern California News Group. Susan, you have weighed in on this controversy surrounding McDonald's, the changing nature of McDonald's, how aesthetically McDonald's now look different, how you order when you go to a McDonald's is different. Many McDonald's, because of the homeless problems, are taking away places to sit, the playpens for the kids to play with. McDonald's, in many ways, is becoming a reflection of our society as a whole.
Yeah, I'm concerned about this. One of the things that's happening in California is that we have this law, which is now going to be subject to a referendum next year's November ballot. But there's a law that essentially sets up a government sector council in Sacramento, which is going to function like a union and order all the fast food franchisees to raise their wages as high as $22 an hour, and then supervise the working conditions and the hours and the scheduling. And this will all be done by the government. And what's that going to do to fast food franchisees? They're already strained by the 3 years of pandemic restrictions and all the rest of the trouble with the supply chain and the inflation and everything else that's causing all the businesses in California to suffer. And now they're going to have this sector council imposing this on us. So I think what's happening with fast food restaurants is they're looking for ways to have less labor, which means more kiosks and more automation. And they're looking for, as you said, to avoid the mayhem of really no law enforcement for public order of any kind. You're going to have more of these places that have no tables, no seating areas, no restrooms for the public, all of these things. And it is a sign that the basic civilization is collapsing under these liberal ideas that there should be no law enforcement. And it's unfortunate because it's unnecessary to have all of these problems. These are man-made problems. Law enforcement is not a new concept, and civil order and public spaces, in order to be maintained for their intended purpose, have to be policed to some degree. And they're not being. The police are being handcuffed. The homeless situation, all the decisions are now being made by the homeless individuals. You see these tapes on YouTube of people crews of people, social workers, police officers, sanitation workers, and they're all sitting around waiting for an individual homeless person to decide to accept services. And if that person says, no, I don't want services, they all have to leave. And that public space is no longer available to the public. Well, that's just not acceptable. That's no way to run a city, a county, a state. These are man-made problems from policy decisions, and it has to be changed.
The first time I became aware that things were going to change at the fast food joints was when they gave you the cup and you had to fill your Coca-Cola on your own. They had the dispensers out in the general area in the store, and instead of paying someone to fill up your cup full of Coke and handing it to you, you had to do it yourself. The first time I ever saw the kiosk, oddly enough, was not in California. It was in Hong Kong. And I walked into the McDonald's, and I ate at McDonald's because I'm in a foreign country. I have this rule, Susan. When I travel, I will not eat any animal that's ever had a speaking role in a Disney movie. And when I can't identify what it is, it started on the airplane right out there. They don't even tell you what you're eating. They just hold up a picture and they say, do you want the yellow or the purple? And I had the purple, and I highly recommend. But I got to the airport in Hong Kong, and I looked at all these restaurants, and I thought, a lot of it looks like Fear Factor stuff to me. So I figured, okay, I saw the Golden Arches. I'd be safe to go to the Golden Arches. I'd be safe to go to McDonald's. I pretty much know the menu by heart. I'll have no problems there. So I walk up to this McDonald's in Hong Kong, and I can't figure out how to use the remote control of the television at home. This is the TV I look at every single day, and every day it's just a new surprise as to how it works to me. And I have to futz with it for a while before I can get the Angel game on. So I walk into this McDonald's, and instead of finding some teenager wearing a visor standing behind a desk in front of a cash register, I see these huge kiosks. I see these huge machines. And you had to order your food through the kiosk. Now, the first time I ever used a kiosk over here, it took me forever to figure out how to do it because I was the same thing with the remote control. I'm like a caveman looking at a fax machine. Now, imagine me trying to figure out how to use one of these kiosks in Chinese. I just had to look at the pictures and figure it out from the pictures and hope that I did it correctly. And then when it came time to pay, that was an adventure too. But this was many moons ago. This was long before the shutdown. And now you go into a McDonald's, and some of them that you go to, like there's one by the Las Vegas Strip, they don't even have anyone at a cash register. It's all kiosks, or you can order it on the app on your phone, but that's all it is. And whenever these state legislatures pass these laws that are intended to give people who work at fast food joints more money, well, fine. But when it becomes cheaper to replace them with a machine, it doesn't matter if the machine's in Chinese, they're going to replace them with a machine.
You're so right. You know, we're seeing this in the hotel workers strike also. During the pandemic, the housekeeping hours were cut back, and now the housekeeping hours are permanently cut back. So they're on strike. They're not making enough money, and they're not getting enough work, and the work is too hard, and they're not getting enough of it. And the thing's just an incoherent set of demands that basically all stem from what you're saying. They found they could make do with less labor, and the union's upset about that. Well, you know, that's how it's going to be. If you make labor more expensive and you don't make the companies more profitable along with that, you're going to find that the companies are going to cut back on labor. And that's what's happening for all of these reasons. But it certainly is the law of unintended consequences from that liberal point of view that unions should be out there getting everybody to go on strike for higher wages. They'll never get the money back that they lose during the strike. You know, maybe future generations might supposedly benefit from it, but probably not. Nobody benefits really from a strike, and it's painful to watch.
No, and they have to knock it off with the theft and the rioting too, and the looting.
Yeah.
Because we did a story on this program about a McDonald's franchise in Los Angeles. It got looted after a Juneteenth celebration, and the guy's owner, I'm not kidding on this, Susan, the man's name is Tony Lardass, went on the news on his birth certificate, went on the news and talked about all of the damage that was done to his store. And all of the cash that was stolen, they stole the cash registers, they stole anything that had money in it, and they smashed it to get the money out, so they ruined it so they couldn't use it again. And you know these guys that own these McDonald's are all getting together and they're saying if people pay through the phone, if the people pay from their app, if people pay from the kiosk, that's all cashless. So the kiosk is useless to the looters. It's useless to the thieves. They can't do anything with it. So we're going to be less of a target if we have no cashiers, no money, no cash. The only thing that we have in there that's worth anything is the pink slime that they use to make the McNuggets with.
Well, they can steal the giant screen menus, but of course, when they get them home, there'll be nothing on except French fries.
That's right. And they all look like prisons, too. And you know, I'll tell you this. I remember I was one of the second graduating class from my high school. It was a brand new high school at the time that I went there. And I was expecting the school to look a certain way because you kind of have an idea as to what schools look like. And I showed up to the school for the first time, and I said to myself, did I take a wrong turn? Because this looks like a prison. They had all of these bars out front. They didn't have the metal detectors at the time, so we had that going for us. The windows weren't actual windows. It was just kind of like little slits in the side of the wall that you could see out, so people couldn't break it and jump through it. And I remember talking to one of the vice principals about that. And he said, oh, yeah, well, we don't get real creative with the architecture. We just hire a firm that builds lots of schools in California. So there are schools all over that look exactly like this. But the bread and butter for this particular firm that's now making schools is building prisons. So I guess they borrowed from their day job. And that's what it looked like. And now these McDonald's look like prisons, too, because they're built like fortresses if and when it hits the fan.
You know, that is so sad. If they're really doing it for security purposes, that is such a sad commentary, because McDonald's was a fun place. It was inviting and festive. It had that sort of get a hamburger at the circus kind of feeling. And if they're going to turn it into a prison where you just drive through, get food, it's so Soviet, and it's really, you know, it's not America. It's not going to be sustained. I think we can solve these problems, and we can bring back the fun and the freedom that make America what it is, and make California what it is, and not have this dire, dark, sad, serious lockdown mentality for the rest of time. We have to defeat that and go back to who we really are.
Susan Shelley, columnist for the Southern California News Group, host of the Howard Jarvis Radio Show, which airs Monday nights right here on AM 790 KABC. And, of course, you can follow Susan on Twitter at Susan_Shelley. Susan Shelley, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you, John. Great to be with you.
It's 1:29. Let's take a look at the road. It's 1:33 on the John Phillips Show, Talk Radio 790 KABC. If you want to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And, of course, if you want to go back and, let's say, listen to the podcast of my interview with Susan Shelley, that's easy to do. All you have to do is subscribe to the podcast, whip out your handy-dandy iPhone, find the podcast button, press that, type in the name of the show, The John Phillips Show, click subscribe, and everything will be loaded on your phone. That way you can listen to us not just between noon and 3, whenever you clean your house, whenever you're cooking dinner, whenever you're on an airplane, whenever you're going for a jog, whatever the case may be, whatever floats your boat, as they say. It's Woo Wednesday. Which means tomorrow is Throwback Thursday. At some point later on in the program, we're going to put the bat sign up. And if you are the lucky winner, you'll be able to pick the bumper music for tomorrow's show. Now, you can pick something that is very popular. You can pick a band that we've all heard of, or a genre that we all know and listen to, or you can get really creative with it. Usually, the more creative, the better. And Art, you're 100% down for that, correct?
Yeah, 110%, John. That's right.
I could hear the enthusiasm in his voice. Do not disappoint this man, please. It's 1:35. That means it's time for headlines. It's 1:39 on the John Phillips Show, Talk Radio 790 KABC. LA City Councilwoman Tracy Park joins us at the top of the hour. Make sure you stick around for that. I want to go back to a point that was just discussed with Susan Shelley of the Southern California News Group, and that is the changing nature of McDonald's. Just physically, aesthetically, what McDonald's looks like when you go into one. We all know what McDonald's is supposed to look like. We've seen them for a long time. It was a business created here in the state of California, San Bernardino. They have the brown roof. They have the golden arches. They usually have that brown brick-looking thing on the floor. They have the hard plastic tables and chairs, the playpens. We know the picture. But because society has changed, so has McDonald's. And now McDonald's looks like a cross between a prison and a fortress that's prepared for an active shooter. What the hell? You're not supposed to die of a gunshot wound in McDonald's. Fast food's supposed to kill you slowly, not fast. But now they're changing the entire way that these buildings look because they have complete chaos going on there all the time. It's like when you go into the 7-Eleven. The cashier is now behind bulletproof glass in many parts of the city. Bulletproof glass to buy a Twix bar. But that's where we are. These shops get robbed all the time. We do these stories in the KABC Crime Blotter of businesses that are going cashless because they get robbed so often. If they advertise the fact that there is no cash on the property, they feel like they're less likely to be the victim of a burglary. And now, by going to mostly kiosk ordering, McDonald's is doing the same thing. But not only is it impersonal when you go and you order, not only do you have to figure out how to work the computer or hope that your phone has enough battery left so you can make your order, but now you don't have the option to pay with cash. That's just not something that you can do. Did you ever think 15, 20, 30 years ago that society would evolve to a point to where cash was not accepted at McDonald's? Cash. But because the state refuses to do anything about the problems that we face, with the homeless blowing up the bathrooms, or the crooks robbing the restaurants, or the looting, the rioting, the shooting, because they've just given up on the government doing anything about it, they're just altering the way their stores look to try to mitigate the damage. And I'm sure part of it is because they want to keep their employees safe. And I'm sure part of it is because it's cheaper for them in the long run. But I bet you anything the insurance policy has something to do with it too. We are becoming, as homeowners and business owners in the state of California, uninsurable. Whether it's fires, whether it's flooding, whether it is crime, we have a lot of problems. And we're not doing anything about the problems. And because we refuse to do anything about the problems, State Farm and Allstate and the rest of them are saying, well, wait a minute. We can't make any money there. Why should we be left paying the bills? And so that's why homeowners, new homeowners, can't buy insurance policies from Allstate and State Farm. And some companies are not offering retail establishments the ability to purchase insurance from them. Well, McDonald's, they're no dummies. That's a multi-billion-dollar operation. They're ahead of the curve, and they're clearly telling their franchisees to just anticipate that the state of California isn't going to do anything about the problems. So just build a store with that assumption. And that's what they're doing. But I don't want to eat my lunch in a place that looks like a prison mess hall. And so much of the state, whether it's the schools, the restaurants, the fill in the blanks, are going to start to look like prisons. I can tell you this. I've been to San Quentin. I went up there for the execution of Tukey Williams. It's in one of the prettiest parts of the state. It's in Marin County, overlooking San Francisco. It is right on the bay. It has one of the best views you can get in the entire state of California. But the prison itself, there wasn't a lot of creativity that went into that. Let me put it that way. And with all of the architects and all of the creative people and the artists that we have in the state of California, we can make buildings look really neat. We have that ability. Look at Disney Concert Hall. That looks like something out of the future. But instead of getting creative, instead of doing things that look artistic and look pretty and look beautiful, we've just given up and we're making our McDonald's look like prisons. That's no good. That's not the way it's supposed to be. We want the state to look pretty and inviting. We don't want it to look like we're getting prepared to get shot up. But I guess this is what we're left with. It's 1:46. Let's take a look at the roads. It's 1:51 on the John Phillips Show, Talk Radio 790 KABC. As you know, our pal Doug McIntyre has a new book that's out. It's called Frank's Shadow, available online at Amazon.com and your neighborhood bookstore. Well, Doug is having a big event in Orange County tonight at the Barnes & Noble at the Irvine Spectrum. It's between 6 and 8 p.m., so get there early so you can find a chair and hear Doug talk about his new book, Frank's Shadow. Again, that's at the Irvine Spectrum between the hours of 6 and 8 p.m., and you can meet Mr. McIntyre in person and get him to sign one of your copies of the book. It's 1:51. This is Talk Radio 790 KABC. It's 1:55 on the John Phillips Show, Talk Radio 790 KABC. Los Angeles City Councilwoman Tracy Park joins us at the top of the hour. Make sure you stick around for that. The Sacramento Bee just dropped a piece that is raising a lot of eyebrows. The headline reads, Gavin Newsom running for president? His fundraising strategy signals White House aspirations. According to the Sacramento Bee, Gavin Newsom is taking fundraising steps often used by potential presidential candidates, setting up multiple committees that in their first 3 months have raised and spent millions of dollars. The 3 Newsom-affiliated committees are a political action committee, which limits contributions to $5,000 a year and can donate to individual candidates, a super PAC, which can raise unlimited amounts of cash but is restricted from promoting a specific candidate, and a joint fundraising committee, which functions like a bank, mostly collecting and distributing funds to other groups. Newsom, of course, has repeatedly denied any interest in running for the nation's highest office next year. But whether President Joe Biden wins or loses, there will be no Democratic incumbent in 2028 as the governors of the nation's largest state, the big winner of 2 elections and a recall, Newsom would be well positioned for a White House run. This, according to reporting from the Sacramento Bee. When you think about it, there's only one reason why he would be raising and spending this money. Because he's termed out from running for another term for governor of California. Can't do that. That's illegal. He's already been mayor of San Francisco. He's termed out of that office. He's already been lieutenant governor. That would be a step backward anyway, but he's termed out there. He could be a U.S. senator, but there's no real option for that because Alex Padilla is relatively young. He will be there for a while, and whoever wins Dianne Feinstein's open seat will likely be there for a while too. That would be the only lateral move in California. And he claims he's not running against Joe Biden, but my guess is he thinks Joe Biden has one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel. And he's essentially running for president without acknowledging that he's running for president, so that if and when something unfortunate were to happen to Joe Biden, he has all of the infrastructure he needs to quickly transition from being a lame duck governor to being a candidate for the presidency. It will take all of the other potential candidates a very long time to do all of these things and to get everything in place. But if he already has it done, if he already has these committees open, if he's already raising and spending money and hiring consultants and developing relationships with people and collecting chits from Democrats all over the nation, he would be a candidate that would be formidable on day one, and he would hit the ground running. If I'm Joe Biden, I'm looking at this and I'm seeing it as a declaration of war. And if I'm Kamala Harris, I definitely see it as a declaration of war. But for whatever reason, they're playing nice with Gavin Newsom. Maybe they don't see what's in front of their face, or maybe they've just chosen to not fight him now. But Gavin Newsom is absolutely running for president. We just don't know if it's happening this time or next time, but he's definitely running. All right, we've got one more hour coming up on the John Phillips Show. Tracy Park joins us next, the councilwoman representing Venice. Don't you go anywhere. This is Talk Radio 790 KABC.